That is arguably the hardest and most pressing apologetic question there is. Because ultimately, the very tidy philosophical and theological answer isn't the right answer sometimes. Sometimes the right answer to the wrong question is the wrong answer. Because I've encountered situations where someone has brought up a variation of the problem of evil to me, and I've just felt uneasy about maybe the tenure that they're coming at with the question, kind of the character that maybe is behind the scenes, and asking them, that's a great question. Why are you asking that question in particular? And finding out, once again, like the previous question related to it, they're personally hurting. And so in that sense, I could give a tidy answer about, if you're positing that something is good, you're positing that there's an objective good and evil, and if there's an objective good and evil, then you're positing an objective law, and an objective law needs an objective lawgiver. So where do we find the groundwork for an objective lawgiver to begin with? Otherwise, you may not like certain things, but to say they ought not to happen is actually an ethical leap to an objective reality that you may or may not have groundwork for. But if that person is struggling because a family member of theirs has cancer, then that particular maybe tidy, tied up in a nice bow answer is not going to speak to them whatsoever. And so that's why that's the hardest question, because there are actually very good answers to it, but often it doesn't speak to the person in front of you, because questions have questioners that sit behind them. And one of the pitfalls of my chosen field of ministry, apologetics, is that sometimes we give answers where we talk at people rather than with people, and there's a danger to that. Because the Christian faith isn't just an intellectual assent, right? It's a personal relationship. And that should also be played out in the answers that we give. So in one sense, I would say that I talk to a lot of people who go through that particular issue, and sometimes they assume that removing God from the equation is the answer, because they're wrestling with this good God, bad world. How do I put these two things together? Unfortunately, though, I think if you remove God from the picture, you're removing an essential component of even raising the objection to begin with. Like I said before, where are we getting these ideas that this is evil and that this other thing is good and that you should be doing situation B above situation A? And ultimately, I think the Christian worldview is unique in that the God of the Bible is not it's not the God of deism who creates and just kind of lets the clockwork dials and switches go into place and looks from afar, viewing what's going on, but actually enters into the creation and experiences pain and suffering and uncertainty and ultimately murder. And so in that sense, the God of the Bible can truly identify with the person who is suffering, because the God of the Bible looks at us when we say, I don't get it. I'm hurting. God, what's going on? And he can say, I understand that. You don't like evil. Me neither. Look at what it did to my son. And there's an aspect of that which I don't think you can find in other worldview perspectives to the same degree.
When you look at the worldview of other world religions, how is Christianity different? And how do we answer the assumption that all roads lead to God equally, and that Jesus, his claims weren't exclusive, that he is the only way to God? How do we unpack the different world religions and understand that?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people assume that Christianity is exclusive and that other worldviews aren't. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Every worldview is going to be exclusive at some point, because all worldviews are making grand claims about whether that's the origin of the universe, or about how to be a good person, or how to seek something that's desirable after this particular time that we experience on Earth. And even an atheistic worldview is going to say that a religious worldview is wrong. And so all worldviews are going to be exclusive. Even the inclusivistic ones, who attempt to grab bag all the parts that they like of any one particular religion, they're going to exclude the exclusivists. And so in that sense, they themselves are likewise exclusivistic. So I think we can stop pretending that there is such thing as neutrality, and that we can own the fact that everybody's going to push back on something, even if it's pushing back on the exclusivists. So that's, I think, a good place to start. But then the kind of place to go on from there is in looking at the Christian worldview. The Christian worldview is different in that a lot of the other worldviews, if not all of the other worldviews, have some form of moralistic ideal to be able to live up to a standard. That can be emotional, that can be intellectual, that can be pragmatic, but if it's telling you, be the best at doing this thing, or be the best at feeling this thing, or being the best at learning this thing, it's all put on your shoulders. And the Christian worldview, I sometimes say, my friend Glenn Scrivener out in the UK with Speak Life Ministries, he has this version that I've taken and adapted where he says, all worldviews are some form of survival of the fittest, but in Christianity, the difference is that the fittest steps down and sacrifices himself for the survival of the weakest. And that switching of motivations really does make Christianity unique, in that it's not about you doing the best or feeling the best or thinking the best, because those things are never going to live up to God's standards. Marred by sin, all of our thinking and feeling and doing is always going to be insufficient. However, because Jesus comes into the picture and he does and feels and thinks the best, he's the perfect example of a human being because he is God incarnate, then we can actually rely on what he has done rather than what we do. And there's a burden releasing in that is unique to Christianity, in that all the other worldviews, at least that I have studied, are telling me to do something. And maybe I do that really well for a short period of time, and that's great. And now I'm kind of on my high horse, but I'm potentially getting arrogant about it because now I'm looking down at people who don't. And if I'm not living up to that standard, that can cause a lot of anxiety and hopelessness in me. Well, Christianity breaks that dichotomy in saying, stop trying. Don't put the effort in that regard. It's not do and you're accepted. You're accepted. Now you can do. You can think and feel and learn all of the things that God has given you to love him with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Those aren't the basis by which you are accepted by God. God accepts you on the basis of his son. He accepts you on the basis of that, the simplicity of putting your trust and hope in Jesus. And now you're not saved by your works, but you're saved for those works. And those works can be an outpouring and a showing of the identity that you've now found in Christ Jesus.
So beautifully explained, and that brought tears to my eyes listening, because you think about the freedom a lot of people need to hear, that it's not work they do, it's something Jesus will do for them. From whatever world religion they come from, whatever worldview, whatever ideology.